So we finally have some Rashee Rice news that appears to be good news, and in this video I'll break down why the alleged nightclub assault situation will more than likely end up resulting in a big fat nothing burger. Then there's a lot to discuss with OTAs in full swing, another draft pick finally signed their contract, and much freaking more. So let's talk about it. But first, how about those? First up, this morning on NFL Network, Tom Pelissero spoke briefly about Chiefs wide receiver Rashee Rice being at OTAs with the team during a time when he's going through some legal issues. Yeah, there's a couple. He brought up the car crash situation in which he is indeed facing felony charges and more than likely an incoming suspension at some point this season. You know, if the legal situation, the legal process plays out before the start of this season. If not, the suspension will probably be next year, but everybody is making it seem like it's going to be this year, like things are going to get wrapped up sooner rather than later. Okay, so there's that situation. But then Pelissero turned his attention to the alleged assault on a photographer that was said to have taken place at a Dallas nightclub a couple weeks ago, with the photographer accusing Rice of punching him in the face. However, there seems to be some good news here with that situation.
There was also a recent accusation by a photographer about him assaulting the photographer on his way out of a club. I actually can tell you the photographer recently dropped those charges, gave an affidavit to the Dallas Police Department saying it was a misunderstanding, wants the charges dropped.
So according to Pelissero, the photographer gave an affidavit to the Dallas Police Department saying it was a misunderstanding and he wants these charges dropped. So yeah, definitely some good news, at least with this incident. It is worth noting, though, that Seth Kaiser, a practicing lawyer, did point out that dropping charges is actually up to the state, not the individual who initially filed the complaint. I don't believe Rice was charged with anything as of yet, but apparently, if the state feels they have enough evidence against Rice, they could still charge him, though it would seem unlikely at this point in time, given the alleged victim actually wants these charges dropped, but it is at least worth mentioning. The question is, why did this man decide to change his tune and ask for any potential incoming charges to be dropped? Well, some believe it's simply because he lied or Rice paid him off. But Seth notes a few other reasons, such as the alleged victim deciding it simply wasn't worth the hassle, he doesn't want the details of the dispute public, decided it could impact his career, or Rice could have potentially hit him because of a misunderstanding, and he just wants to move on from it all. Ultimately, we may never really know the reason as to why, and the NFL could still look into the situation, but I would say the most likely outcome at this point in time is they won't find much, and at least with this alleged nightclub situation, Rice is looking to be in the clear. I still look back to what the owner of the nightclub said about Rice as well. He said he was there for less than 30 minutes, was calm and respectful, and didn't even order a drink. The owner then said he and the police were both going to be looking through the surveillance footage to see if they could find anything, and honestly, I feel like if there was actually something of Rice hitting this man, TMZ would have already sent it out to the masses. From here, we are mainly waiting for the legal process of the car crash incident to play out and see what sort of suspension comes from it. But while all that plays out, Rice is in KC and working with the team as he should. And it is worth noting that Nate Taylor put out an article around 1 p.m. today and said that Rice is still under investigation by the Dallas Police Department for allegedly punching a photographer inside a Dallas nightclub earlier this month, according to a report by WFAA. Even though the man has declined to pursue charges, according to multiple reports, it's just worth noting that the police department are, at least as of right now, still looking into this. But with all that being said, let me know your thoughts on the photographer that was allegedly assaulted by Rice, turning in a new affidavit to the police, wanting charges dropped, saying it was all a misunderstanding, and why you think that could be in the comments. Now, before we get into a couple of Chiefs OTAs highlights, I found it worth circling back about a couple things I discussed in yesterday's video. Some in the comments were, or they seemed appalled that I said Harrison Butker's speech was among the list of controversial Chiefs offseason events. I mean, all I said was this: it would be helpful if Chiefs players stayed out of trouble or the controversial spotlight for the rest of this offseason and just focus up on this freaking three-peat. Then kicker Harrison Butker was up next, not for getting in trouble, but for statements he made during a commencement speech that people want him to get in trouble for, and that speech was during a Catholic graduation the weekend before last. I made it clear Butker is not in trouble, even though some would like him to get in trouble or be in trouble because of things he said that they did not agree with. But to be clear, I do not think Butker should be in any trouble here. That is absolutely ridiculous. I did an entire standalone video on the Butker situation on why this man is protected under the First Amendment, and I support his right to free speech, just like I would support somebody else on the opposite side of the spectrum in their beliefs. But the amount of comments acting like Butker's speech wasn't controversial was a bit surprising to me. I mean, the very definition of controversial is giving rise or likely to give rise to public disagreement. And if you don't think that speech gave rise to public disagreement, then I don't know what to tell you. You can agree with what he said, that's fine, but topics such as pro-life, pro-choice, religion of any kind, politics, no matter which way you lean, those are all controversial at their core, and that's why it's all over the news, the media, and everybody's going nuts, whether you believe he was right or wrong. It's controversial. Then I brought up the idea that I didn't think was that ludicrous of Kansas needing to get with the program and legalize marijuana after I covered the arrest of Wanya Morris and Jason Godric last week. They got arrested for having some very bad, scary weed in their possession in Kansas. Nearly half the states have legalized the use of marijuana already, with many more to follow here soon. So I'm not sure why that ruffled the feathers of the sensitive. I don't even smoke, but it's 2024, guys. Legalize it and let adults make their own decisions and quit judging the actions of others based on something as trivial as that. Kansas has its flaws. Just like Missouri, no state is perfect, but being arrested for having a little weed is absurd in this day and age. If you disagree, that's fine, but this is my channel. I'm allowed to give my opinion and my thoughts on things from time to time, and guess what? You're gonna be all right. Next up, day 2 of OTAs came and went, with the Chiefs social media team dropping absolutely nothing yesterday and then showing a very limited amount of clips, at least so far on Tuesday. I'm recording this around 3:30. If there's more, I will bring it up, but so far, all they have shown is players walking in to get ready for practice. They started off with QB1 Patrick Mahomes, as well as a plethora of others. You had cornerback Trent McDuffie, running back Isaiah Pacheco, running back Louis Rees-Zammit, wide receiver Hollywood Brown, defensive end George Karlaftis, safety Jaden Hicks, tight end Jared Wiley, offensive lineman CJ Hansen and Trey Smith. You had defensive end Derrick Nnadi, who, by the way, made his rounds on social media yesterday when it was announced he's sponsored the adoptions of more than 500 dogs over the last 4 years, which is freaking incredible. Then the social media team showed defensive end Felix Anudike-Uzomah, linebackers Nick Bolton and Jack Cochran, offensive tackle Kingsley Suamataia, and finally center Creed Humphrey. And since we are on the subject of players from various pieces of the roster, I wanted to touch on a few of the position battles I'm going to be watching out for during the rest of OTAs, minicamp, training camp, and preseason. Of course, you got to watch the left tackle spot between the rookie, Kingsley Suamataia, and second-year tackle, Wanya Morris. Do the Chiefs find that one of them stands out enough above the other to roll with one of the young guys, or do they later opt to bring in a veteran such as Donovan Smith or David Bakhtiari? Time will surely tell, and while we await to see what the coaching staff decides to do here, it's worth bringing up that we no longer have to wait for Kingsley Suamataia to sign his rookie contract. According to the Chiefs transaction page on their website, Kingsley has officially been signed to his 4-year rookie deal, and that leaves only wide receiver Xavier Worthy needing to get his deal done to finish up every draft pick the Chiefs selected in the 2024 NFL Draft. And for what it's worth, it was expected for the first and second round picks to take a little bit longer than everyone else to get their deals done due to these contracts being larger and featuring more guaranteed money. Anyway, the next position battle I'm going to be watching out for is the wide receiver room. You have Justin Ross, who had all the offseason hype last year, but after a lackluster season was completely derailed due to a 6-game suspension midway through last year, the question is, can he do enough to make the roster over Sky Moore or Kadarius Toney? You could certainly make a case for it, but it's a battle worth keeping tabs on. Many are also excited about Nico Remigio, the undrafted wideout from last year, who stood out during training camp but sadly was placed on IR after injuring his shoulder during that time. And the biggest question I have about the wide receiver room is when Rashee Rice gets suspended, who's going to step up and kind of take his spot for the time being? It's going to be something at least worth watching out for. Next up is the running back room. Last week, the Chiefs surprisingly released veteran running back LaMichael Pirine, and with Jerick McKinnon still a free agent, watching that battle for the running back 3 spot's going to be an interesting one with newly signed UDFA's Carson Steele and Amani Bailey in the mix, as well as already rostered backs Keontae Ingram, Derrick Prince, and Hassan Hall. Maybe Jerick McKinnon returns after all later this offseason like he has the last couple of years, closer to training camp, or maybe one of these younger guys gives the coaching staff enough confidence to go in a different direction from years past. And finally, with L'Jarius Sneed now gone, which defensive back is going to step up in an attempt to fill the void? We already know Trent McDuffie is going to hold it down, but will Joshua Williams or maybe Jalen Watson earn the clear-cut starting role for year 3, or could Nazeeh Johnson be that guy as he returns from a torn ACL last year? KC also has Nick Jones entering year 2, an intriguing and very athletic UDFA and Miles Battle, as well as their 6th round draft pick in Kamal Hadden fighting to earn a spot. This wasn't an exhaustive list by any means, but left tackle, wide receiver, running back, cornerback, those are some key ones for me to watch. But at the end of the day, there's going to be some key battles to watch all along the roster, even including the punter position, with Matt the punt god Ariza being signed back in February, and then UDFA punter out of BYU Ryan Rico was added to the roster as well earlier this month following the draft. He's one of the best punters in the entire draft class that surprisingly went undrafted, so it's safe to say we got plenty to keep our eyes on this season. With that being said though, which position groups are you most interested in keeping tabs on? Let me know either way in the comments down below, and until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those?